Good morning, everybody. It's me, Mitch. Sunday morning, September 29th. Wow. Almost to October. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Mitch. Drink it if you got it. Today I'm going to talk about whether or not carnivore is the right lifestyle for you. Might not be. Might not be for everybody. In fact, it definitely isn't for everybody. Before I do that, I want to make an announcement. It's pretty well finalized. Friday, the 25th of October at 11:30 in the morning, a meetup here at the Brazilian Steakhouse in Melbourne. If you live in Florida, if you're anywhere where you don't mind driving a couple hours, come and join us, please. But RSVP to me. I need to know how many people are coming. So email me at oldguycarnivore@gmail.com. Let me know if you're coming. How many of you are there? Diet ranges from one species, one animal to another. And in most animals, you don't find that wide a range of diet across that individual species. Just about all lions eat the same. When you take humans out of the equation, all dogs should have the same food and generally eat the same food. Koala bears eat eucalyptus leaves. This adaptation to their food has been honed over hundreds of millions of years. Why are humans different? What the hell is so different about us? Why are we so different? Because we are different. Just look around. Most lions pretty much look like a lion. Dogs are different. Dogs are wildly different. And the reason dogs are wildly different is because humans have interfered with their breeding. Basically, took it out of the hands of natural selection. Same thing with plants. We've genetically engineered things. We've selectively bred things. We've interfered with evolution. We have short-stopped evolution in so many things because of how clever we are. And because we're so clever, we figured things out over millions and millions of years about how to migrate. And if we didn't like the conditions, the weather, the food supply in a particular area, or because that changed, we started traveling. And because we started traveling and because we were clever, we started inventing things. And we invented the wheel. Then we invented the boat, and we invented the jet airplane. Now we're working on a spaceship. What this has done to us as a species, it has transplanted us instantly and plopped us down in the middle of other human beings whose particular adaptation and genetic patterns may have taken hundreds of thousands of years to fine-tune themselves to the weather, to the food availability of that location where they lived. Think about this. up until the invention of modern travel, most human beings who lived on this planet never traveled more than 50 miles from home, where their parents lived and their grandparents lived and their back generations and generations. And in the course of those generations, there weren't enough geological changes, tectonic plate movements, changes in major weather patterns. Those things take hundreds of thousands of years. And we became programmed, pretty much each one of us, to live in the environment that we were best suited for, and that happened to be where we were, because natural selection took care of fine-tuning us for that environment. And because there were so many different environments, because of the migrations, slow as they may have been, the migrations of humans around the planet, we had humans living in the Arctic. We had humans living in South America. We had Incas. We had American Indians. We had so many people all over Europe in different climates, certainly with different availability of food. And we became pretty settled in. And then it was as though the entire human race was all picked up, thrown in a blender and given a quick stir and scattered back out all over the world. That happens with intermarriage. So, somebody came over on a ship 500 years ago from Asia, and they settled in New York. And they met and fell in love with somebody from the other side of the world, from where their family was raised. Those two, even though their genetics are still human, have many different changes in their, maybe not so much core genetics, but their epigenetics. In other words, the things that control how they react to the food, the environment, and everything else, how their physiology works. And they marry, and out pops the offspring who got half his DNA from the mother, half from the father. And God knows what this kid is now fine-tuned for. And to make matters worse, the next generation comes along, and that kid marries somebody else's kid who, God knows what combination of adaptive genetics they have. And it doesn't take very many generations where things start to become homogenized. And that means that nobody, no human, the more and more these genetics are combined and split up through reproduction among people whose ancestry comes from many different places, adapted to many different things, pretty soon we become homogenized. I think you can project this out. If we go another 500 years, there's a good odds that just about every human being will have very similar traits. I think we will all have settled in with a very light brown skin color. But in the process of all of these changes caused by the fact that we've relocated different people rapidly, allowed them to reproduce together, these changes are inevitable. But what we end up with is, we end up at this time when these changes are really showing their effects, with people who are wildly different in the things that, in the foods that they react to, and their physical traits, and especially in which foods cause which problems. A great example of this is the human races adapting to milk and becoming less lactose intolerant. Humans were not supposed to, or not designed to, or adapted to drink cow's milk. Many human beings on the planet today are still lactose intolerant, and they are descendants of people who never were exposed. They didn't raise cows, they didn't drink cow's milk. They stayed lactose intolerant. Other people, other tribes, let's say, different geographical areas who did discover that there was nutrition in cow's milk, over time became more adapted to it. They developed the physiology to digest it and not be lactose intolerant and not have all that digestive distress from eating lactose. And in each of those separate, let's call them tribes, the lactose intolerance in one didn't change. In the other, it got to the point where everybody in that tribe was lactose tolerant now. And that was well and good, as long as they stayed where they were and this tribe kept drinking milk, that tribe didn't. But a couple of them got on an airplane, one from each tribe, ended up in New York, met each other, fell in love, and got married. Now you've got the genetics from somebody who has adapted to lactose and somebody who hasn't. So the odds that their kid is going to be lactose intolerant are about 50-50. And this has happened with basically everything. And we have become, because like a Rubik's Cube, everything gets mixed up so much, we have, each of us, developed almost unique traits of how we react to food and climate and different bacteria, and trying to determine the best diet for everybody is impossible. It's pretty well narrowed down to, and it would be great if we could actually analyze the genetics and the epigenetics of an individual and tailor the perfect eating regimen for them. I think it's probably possible. It would be a huge, major undertaking. It would cost a fortune right now, but maybe eventually we'll, as science and technology keep progressing at the rate they do, maybe someday we'll have a pill engineered for broad genetic types where, okay, if you're lactose intolerant, take this pill. And I'm not going to be there to see it, and I certainly don't want to be part of the experiment, but someday. So what are we left with? We're left with a task of trying to figure out which foods should we eat based on just how we happen to turn out after the shuffling of the genetic deck over so many generations. And that's why some people can be vegans, some people can be carnivore, most people can be in between, and not everybody actually should do carnivore. That's from an appropriate food standpoint. But that's not the most important. That's not the most important factor that we have to consider. It is a factor to consider, but not the most important factor to consider. I know that all of this that I'm talking about is just not something that we hear, not often, but maybe never. It's not a way of thinking. we're all the product of a great, great shuffling of the genetic deck. Because we're so different, we all react differently to different things. And that's where the biggest deciding factor, in my opinion, again, this is all my opinion, the biggest deciding factor is how addictive a personality, how addictive physiology you have. Because it's the addiction to any number of different substances that really, really cements the direction that we take and what we will continue to do. Because it's no doubt that if somebody doesn't have a tendency to be addicted to alcohol, they cannot or will not become an alcoholic. And becoming an alcoholic will pretty much set you on a path that will determine how the rest of your life is going to turn out. Same thing with a sugar addiction, a carbohydrate addiction. There are people, although not many, because we have been bullied and brainwashed over the past 60, 70 years into thinking that we're doing something for our health by eating all these manufactured addictive foods. We didn't know any better. But because we've been so fooled, the human race has pretty much been steered like cattle off to slaughter, funneled down into a path of ill health, chronic disease, and here come the drug companies to the rescue. But carbohydrate addiction, until the scam of it was set upon us, was never that much of a problem. Not until there were copious amounts of sugar to be had. Thank you, sugar companies. Not until food companies engineered the addictive qualities of this food. Thank you. And not until the drug companies discovered they like everybody being sick and they started supporting the effort as opposed to trying to cure these things. Better to treat somebody for life than to cure them and never see them again. Sounds inhumane. Whoever said humans were humane. And I believe that even ignoring the great genetic shuffling, if we concentrate just on our addictive personalities, I think we might find the answer to which diet is right for us. And all the different levels of these ketogenic diets depend on how much carbs a day that you allow yourself, and whether and what pretty much what level of carb intake is going to set you down a path where you can't stop, like a runaway train. For most of us, I think we are carb addicts. I think they've been very successful in addicting the public, and that's very evident when you go into any place that sells food. It's all carbohydrates. It's all junk. It's all poison. Plants have always been there. Our plants today don't resemble the plants our ancestors ate. And the big push has been pushing more and more people into thinking that these are the really healthy foods, demonizing the red meat, and the animal products, which are our real food. We are simply brainwashed, misled, misguided, and don't know any better now. It's an incredible state of affairs. And at least finally now we have some people trying to bring this to the level of national attention. But even that I don't think is ever going to be strong enough to overcome people's addictions. Because since when do addicts ever respond to reason and common sense? The preservation of life and the species itself will overpower any rational thinking, and our addictions are the product of our efforts to survive over millions of years. So here we are. Are we circling the drain? Are we so far down the rabbit hole that we can't climb out? Are we past the event horizon of the black hole? In a lot of respects, I think maybe we are. And if you're a severe carb addict and you learn to recognize that fact, yes, you have to be on a zero carbohydrate diet until you have tamed those addictions. And even then, you have to be so careful. So in that respect, yes, I think the carbohydrate-free diet, I think the carnivore diet is pretty much the only way a carb addict can ever return his physiology to that of a caveman, where food is not the main event. And you lose weight and you get healthy and your chronic conditions go away and life is good. We're afraid to give those things up. But there are people who simply are not carb addicts, or they're not a flaming carb addict. And their addictions aren't so strong that they can exercise a little free will and self-control. These people don't need to be on a carnivore diet, or they don't need to be on as strict a regimen as Michaela Peterson, who can only eat red meat, salt, and water. And everybody has to discover what level of, let's say, plant material they can bring into their diet, because human beings have been eating plants for a long time, and we can handle them. Maybe instead of 100% optimal health, the toxins will knock us back to 95, but certainly much better than the sugar-poisoned civilization that we are now. And forget about seed oils. Seed oils are the one thing that need to be removed from virtually everybody's diet. The subject of which diet should you be on, and what are the different iterations, and who should be on what diet and why, is going to be the subject of a video, but it's a very complicated thing and not something for this morning talk. What I'm trying to do this morning is introduce you to the concept that we don't need to be militant carnivores. If I want to drink coffee and it does not trigger my addictions, and if I'm getting, instead of 100% perfect health, there might be something in this because it came from a plant where I'm only getting 99% health, so be it. I enjoy it. I'm not ready to go live in a sparse steel box. Same thing with my cigars. Would I be better off without them? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it's a trade-off. Maybe the relaxation and stress relief that I get from puffing on a cigar offsets whatever damage that I might potentially get from puffing on a cigar, not inhaling a cigar. I don't think cigarette smoking is going to be healthy. Although I do say, and I don't want to start any arguments about it, I do say that 100 years ago, half the people in this country were smoking cigarettes. Look at World War II. I mean, everybody was, the doctors were smoking. I'm surprised the surgeons weren't smoking through their masks in the operating rooms. And this was before sugar, before carbs, before highly processed foods. And the overall average health of the American people was 10 times better than it is now. And if we could take every carbohydrate addict on the planet and take away that carbohydrate addiction and addict them back to nicotine and have them all smoking cigarettes instead of eating carbohydrates, I think we'd see a dramatic improvement in overall health. I know that sounds silly because tobacco's been so demonized. But when we were smokers, we didn't have the problem. We had problems. Sure, we had problems. We got emphysema. People were sucking all kinds of shit into their lungs. But they were not poisoning themselves. And the chronic diseases, the heart disease wasn't there as much. The diabetes definitely wasn't there. The dementia and Alzheimer's wasn't there. I think we were better off as smokers, but I don't want to go there. I'll get a lot of pushback on that. First thing you need to do to determine whether you need to go carnivore, because it sounds extreme and starts out, and it is a very limiting lifestyle in a lot of respects. You have to figure out some way to determine whether you need to. Best way to do that, I think, is trial and error. You go on carnivore for a month or two. That's a great elimination diet. Then you start adding some things in, not the things that you're craving so much, not the processed foods and the high sugar foods, but you start adding in some carbs, the kind of carbs that our ancestors ate. Some vegetables, maybe a little fruit, but not much. And you see if you don't start getting carb creep. Carb creep means that, well, I'll have a little bit today, and then tomorrow you have a little more, and then the next thing you know, you're having it every day, and then the next thing you know, you're binging on it, and you've gained all your weight back. Well, you've learned a lesson. I guess I have to be on a lower carb diet for a longer period of time, hopefully forever, which then becomes your lifestyle. But we're all so different. Understanding why we're different actually is good for us, because then we know that maybe just because that person can do something doesn't mean we can do something. The moral of the story today is don't be a carnivore Nazi. Everybody has to learn for themselves where on the spectrum of 0 carbs to hundreds and hundreds of grams of carb a day that they can live in the best health and normalized weight. And in that respect, we're all different. But we are still human beings. And at the core of it all, our physiology at the basic level still works pretty much the same. I don't care who you are. Too much sugar is not going to be good for you. Period. I don't care who you are. Too many oxalate-containing plants are not going to be good for you. I don't care who you are. Not getting enough animal protein is not going to be good for you. And I don't care who you are. Not getting an adequate amount of animal fat is not going to be good for you. So the building point, the starting point, the basics of a healthy nutrition is cut out the sugar, cut out the plants, increase the fat consumption, moderate protein, and start there. Give it a chance to let you start to heal. Follow what I've said is about the only way that I ever found to overcome these cravings when they happen. Those things are in my videos about how to start carnivore. Talk about them over and over. If you can survive that, the first 30 to 60 days, without falling prey to the cravings and ending up diving headfirst into a 5-gallon can of ice cream, you'll get to a place where you've drastically improved your mitochondrial health. We awaken the fat burning pathways. You're starting to live like human beings are supposed to. And at that point, you can decide which path are you going to take going forward, whether it's going to be a low carb diet, a ketogenic diet, a carnivore diet. We've given these things names, but all they are is just different amounts of carbohydrates that you can tolerate in a day without going over the hump again and sliding down that addictive sliding board. I think I've gone on long enough today. I hope that this has made some sense to you. And if it hasn't, just keep listening, because I'm going to keep talking more and more about this concept and giving you more and more examples. And hopefully, it'll gel in your mind and you'll say, wow, it's really not that complicated, just hard to explain to somebody not used to thinking in these terms. So have a great Sunday. Have fun, stay safe. If you're recovering from the storm, our hearts are still going out to you. Life goes on. Take the rest of the day off and eat meat.